Welcome to Let There Be Talk, Monday, September 24th. Getting close to October. You know what that means? Get your Halloween mask. So funny, I see these Halloween stores popping up all over. What's up with those Halloween stores that are open like all year round? Who's buying shit all year? I would love to go in there and just see, how bored the employees are. Just like, are you here for the Freddy Krueger mask in February? Anyway, how are you guys? Great day for me. Just got home from an incredible road trip with Mr. Bill Burr. We were in Norfolk, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, and Charleston, South Carolina. 3 cities I've never been to, and 3 thumbs up. All 3 different, all 3 amazing audiences. I really like Charleston. I was there yesterday, and we did 2 shows. And wow, the architecture there is just unbelievable. I had no idea. I was down there in the kind of historic area, went to the Calhoun Mansion, took a tour, a $17 tour. Some $12 million mansion, which to me seemed cheap. If that mansion was in San Fran, it would be $100 million. But a lot of the mansions down there look a lot like Pacific Heights era of San Francisco, which is unbelievable. I had no idea that kind of look was out there and how old these places are. Built in 1735. Lincoln's buddies lived here. President Lincoln's friend lived here. All kinds of just history down there. And people getting it back together after the hurricane, thank God, down there. The weather down there. Like, that's one of those places where you're like, this is amazing. And not once did I think I could live here because the humidity was just... I've come to conclusion. I think I talked about it a couple of episodes. Fuck humidity, man. I just do not. I run pretty hot, man. I run pretty hot, so I'm not down with humidity. But I walked all around Charleston, and it was worth it. It was worth wet pants. Just wet pants. It was worth it, though, to go see these places, man. I love architecture. I love amazing buildings, architecture, architects. I would love to get some more architects on here. Some old school dudes, some kings of design, all that shit. I follow a couple cool Instagram accounts where I just look at the stuff, man. What was this one I just followed here a couple days ago? It was like, let me see if I can find it. If you're into that kind of stuff, some people aren't into it. I never really understood that, like how you could look at a building and not care. I look at a building and I'm just like, wow, I could live in there. Look at that place. And I like all different. I like modern, ultra modern. I like Spanish. I like craftsman's. I like it all, man. Whatever it is, if it's a primo version of that style, I'm into it. Anyway, what is the name of some of these accounts? That's what I hate about Instagram. The account that you just recently followed isn't at the top, which is just lunacy to me and an app design. But anyway, if I do find it, I'll post it up. Speaking of apps accounts, here's Wyco Vintage. Just came across it. They got an amazing Pink Floyd Animal shirt up. Original from 77. Go look at that, man. It's an original Pink Floyd Animal shirt. If you're looking for an amazing rock t-shirt, don't go anywhere else, man. Wyco Vintage. These guys have the best rock vintage t-shirts I've ever seen. They got over 3,000 right now. 3,000. And they post up like 50 new ones every Friday. Check them out. WhyCoVintage.com. Use the code DELRAZOR and get yourself a sweet discount. And follow them on Instagram, man. It's going to get you jonesing. You're going to be freaking out. They got a great Pink Floyd. They got an amazing Pixies shirt up right now. Some great Pearl Jam. I love their account. YCOVintage.com, your spot for the best vintage rock t-shirts. Let's get into the guest today. I'm in New York City, and last week I sat down with this incredible funny man, Ron Bennington. And if you listen to this episode, you will realize Ron and I, we can do some serious ping pong on music talk. Holy shit, this guy, he can run a rabbit hole, man. He can run you down that rabbit hole of some deep music topics and comedy and radio. What a great man. One of my newer friends here in New York, and one of the many reasons that I love New York is how cool some of the people are that I've been meeting here. Ron has been in radio most of his life and comedy, and he is fucking funny. And people love his show. Like, Ron is a guy I didn't know. I didn't know about Ron and Fez show and all that, Opie and Anthony and all that, because I grew up on the West Coast and that stuff wasn't out there. But the rabid following that all these shows have is hats off, man. Mad respect to those shows out there. And Ron is one of those shows now, the Bennington Show on Sirius XM. And I was lucky enough to be on his show last Thursday, and after we were done, we sat down in his studio and we recorded my podcast. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. I love talking to Ron, and I know that Ron and I are going to be talking for a long time about music. Before I get into the episode, if you are a Patreon subscriber, I've been putting up those bonus episodes on patreon.com/Dean Del Rey. I hope you guys are enjoying those. Been putting them up every Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday or so. And I've been having fun doing them. They're just riffing on all kinds of topics, whatever's on my mind that week. Let's give a shout out to all the new Patreoners. This has been very successful in the last month now that I'm putting up content for you guys. This is private, personal episodes on Patreon. Shout out to Sean Ryan, Dan Cronin, Kevin Gibo, John Scamira, Alex Kaminsky, B, just B, letter B, all right, B, Daniel Marcus, Richard Bailey, Jake Metz, Jeff Stout Jr. That looks like all dudes right there. This podcast is just a sword fest. This podcast is definitely... We need some female listeners, man. What, there's no women out there that like music and comedy? I mean, you know. I know I'm not a sexy, foxy comic, but come on. Anyway, thank you, Patreoners. I love you, and thanks for subscribing. If you want to donate, everybody, it's patreon.com/Dean Del Rey. Get your shout-outs, get your bonus episodes, and all kinds of fun stuff. I've got a new shirt coming out this week. I'll be posting that up any day now with a pre-order. It's a spin on the Grateful Dean. One last thing. This Friday night, September 28th, Bill Burr and I will invade Los Angeles, California's world-famous LA Forum. That is this Friday night, September 28th. Do not sleep. Get your tickets. That is pretty much the last of the road dates I have on the books now, other than this just in. December 26th through the 30th, I will be at the Las Vegas Comedy Cellar at the Rio Hotel, and that is quickly becoming one of my new favorite gigs, and I hope to be doing that like every other month. That's December 26th through the 30th. That's about it on the books right now for gigs until 2019. Other than that, you can just see me at the Comedy Store and the Comedy Cellar, bouncing back and forth from New York and LA every couple weeks. I love you guys. Let's keep the candles lit. Let's get into the episode. Here he is, Mr. Ron Bennington. Don't forget to subscribe and rate and review on iTunes. and my YouTube channel. All that stuff helps. Spread the word, Del Raisers. Let's get into it with Ron Bennington. Yeah, all right, here we are, another episode of Let There Be Talk. Hilarious. I'm in the Sirius XM building doing my own show with a great guest. Introduce yourself, my man.
Ron Bennington, and we are in, this is Cousin Brucey's original studio. Do you know who Cousin Brucey is?
Nope.
Cousin Brucey is a legend in New York radio. He's been doing oldies since about 67. Before that, it was like the top, but it would already, by 67, that 50s and early 60s music was already the oldies. You know, that's how much music changed. But he's one of the guys at Shea Stadium. He brought the Beatles out on stage.
Oh, on that Shea Stadium concert.
Yeah, and he's still doing radio here.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. Like, what was this place before Sirius XM? A big radio place?
Well, this, he had done local New York radio for a lot of years. I'm not even sure which, one of the big stations, like
an AM station, probably back in the day,
Yeah, big flamethrower. But could you imagine how few people have picked up on the Beatles' heat where they ever, had that opportunity to go, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles?
That's nuts, man. That is nuts. And, they played their last concert ever in 66 at Candlestick in San Francisco. That's where I'm from, the Bay Area, and then they never play again until the rooftop concert. So it's so wild that they never played during like the Rubber Soul or Yellow Submarine or any of the psychedelic era. You know, God, that would have been so cool to see.
So just think, most people will put them as the greatest band of all time, and they weren't really a live band at any, any point. And I remember even seeing Mick Jagger was saying to Lennon, he goes, "Oh no, they don't just scream anymore. You ought to go back and try." What I mean? Like they're listening, they want to hear it because they were in such
because they couldn't hear it. That's why they left, because they couldn't hear. Also, when they started, they were using those horns. The arena, the baseball park's sound system. I'm like, number 32, Babe Ruth. That's the same one. They're like, you love me, yeah. I mean,
just a PA system in a ballpark.
That's all it was. Those big horns. Like Clips horns,
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is, man. And it's, I remember one time, I think it was one of them on the documentary, like George Harrison or something, he just started playing like while they were playing, because nobody
cared.
Nobody cared.
Yeah. Little girls were just screaming.
Wow, man. That's an amazing time, Beatlemania. I'm not a 50s music guy.
Really?
No, and I'm a huge music guy, and I do love American Graffiti, and I do love Wolfman Jack, and I love radio like you do.
Yeah.
And one of my dreams would be to do like one day Howard Stern retires and I'm the new Howard Stern. But the music never really grabbed me. I think it was just a little too safe for me. And once the 60s of Zeppelin and Stones come in, and I'm not a Beatles guy either. I love the Beatles now, but, I don't play them all the time. And The Who would be the fourth for me, out of all that. But Zeppelin would be first for me because it was dark and crazy.
Well, with Zeppelin, I'm always like, some of their music I love.
Yeah.
And then any of the wizard rock, I'm like, I'm tapping. I cannot, you know what I mean? Like that, like lyrics are always important to me, and I get embarrassed by a lot of people's lyrics.
Yeah.
But you and I were talking about, you said at one point you almost saw their last show in the States.
I was 1 year behind seeing it. So I saw, my whole introduction to music in the Bay Area comes from the master Bill Graham himself.
Sure.
I think Bill Graham is one of the greatest humans ever to walk the earth. If you read his book and read what he went through to where
it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And he had a vision early on, is what I love about music, because you're a lot like me. I don't like just one type of music. And I don't understand people that only go like, when I was in high school, guys would be like, that ain't metal. You know, I'd be loving Prince, But Bill Graham, to me, was really the first guy that, he put together like Miles Davis, Cheech and Chong, and Alice Cooper, that kind of stuff. So he would put on these massive ballpark shows at where the Oakland A's play, called Day on the Greens. And I want to do a documentary on it. They were the greatest concerts ever. If you look at them, they went from like 73 to about 85. And I mean, they're insane. So Zeppelin's last show ever in the States was in 77 at Oakland Coliseum. And it's the one where it's the Stonehenge is the stage. And Bill would have this guy named Baron Woolman took the pictures. Another guy would paint these scrims so that it wouldn't just look like you're seeing a show at a ballpark. There'd be themes, like one was Mount Rushmore. Another one was like Boston with the ship flying in. And Zeppelin was Stonehenge. So you felt like you were at a play or something, an event.
Yeah, that is true. And also, I mean, how much credit do you give Bill Graham for that 60s San Francisco sound? I mean, does that scene, and I love to get into conversations like, if you could time travel, what scene would you want to be at?
Right.
But San Francisco in the late 60s would have been one of the most amazing places in the world.
Yeah, you got the Dead, Starship, you have, Airplane.
Janis
Joplin. You have
really young
Santana.
Steve Miller is playing.
Miller.
Yeah, Santana is playing there. And that thing is got everything.
Van Morrison.
Well, that was the thing. Like, the Doors would come up from L.A. and nobody had that scene. But at the same time, there was another, because I'm in Detroit at almost the same time. There was a completely separate scene going on, and it was all just wrapped around one ballroom. But because it was bigger, the bands got louder, right? So if it wasn't the size of the venue, the MC5 probably never would have gotten as loud as they were.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
That is
when
weird.
You think about that?
Also, what you think about it was just crazy is there's no internet, there's no phone, videos or anything. So every scene is so organic because they're not seeing anything else. So they're blooming their own full-blown organic sound and scene. So each one's completely different. The MC5, that's not even close to what the Dead and Janis and all them were doing.
And it was literally the same exact times.
It's so wild.
So, you had like in Detroit, you had like Mitch Ryder was playing with them, and
Early Nugent.
Nugent when he was with the Amboy Dukes and all that.
And that stuff's kind of psychedelic acidy.
Right. Yep. And they were just trying to blow it up. They were trying to, just basically blow each other off the stage. But the fact that there wasn't an internet and they didn't know about each other kind of purified it.
Oh, that's what makes it amazing.
In a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
So I think like a lot of times now, young guys would be able to go, oh, this is happening. I just saw it on YouTube. Let's try to. And all of a sudden, you don't. Maybe a lot of guys go too early with it. You know?
Real generic.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that too, because even when I had Scott Ian from Anthrax on the podcast, and if that early thrash metal scene that was happening in San Francisco, which is the next scene to happen in San Francisco, Anthrax was on the East Coast, and I asked him, I go, how were you picking up on the scene? This is pre-internet again, 80, in the early 80s. And he said tape trading.
Right,
so cassettes were floating around all the way across country. Kids would go visit families in the Bay Area and vice versa. And this is a big in our area. Here, check it out. And that's pretty organic too, because you're hearing something, but you're not getting the full picture.
Right.
So you're taking what you process it as and start writing your own music, which is also a cool way.
All right. So the same time that sound's going on in San Francisco in the early 80s, DC has that weird thing going down.
Yeah, what's that called? I saw it on the Dave Grohl thing, man.
Right.
That whole sound I had no idea was going on.
Well, if you go down there, the number of people who were like, "Oh, I was there, and there was 15 people, or there was 30 people, and we were playing, in a backyard," that always cracks me up.
Yeah.
Like everyone seemed to have seen it
Yeah.
at one time or another.
Yeah. What was that stuff called?
What would you call that, Chris? What?
Like the DC hardcore scene, like Fugazi?
Yeah.
Minor
What's
Threat?
that scene?
No, before. It's like right before that. Yeah. I mean, but they called it something on there because there was like Bad Brains and stuff.
Right.
But there was something right before that.
Oh, you're talking about like the go-go music
that
too?
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, that stuff is
That stuff.
Yeah, that was like a black scene that was happening at the same time.
But that was really interesting that I had never heard, me being a music freak, had never heard of the go-go scene at all.
Well, that is always really interesting too when there's like a kind of scene that exists and everybody in that area knows about it, but no one else does,
That's wild.
It's like that shag music that was just along the coast, you know what I mean? Just along the coast of the Carolinas, and it's a weird R&B, and dances go with it, and then you're like, but who else was into this?
Yeah.
Nobody, but we've been
shag
doing
music. Is that like the slang for fucking, Like,
yeah,
is it
I think so.
It was like sexy R&B?
Yeah, it was like sexy R&B, but not all R&B. It was like just some.
Right.
And for some reason, the band chairman of the board is beloved there. Like they could play 15, 20,000 people and then go 40 miles away and, nobody knows them.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's also kind of like a lot of like early jam bands, they would have these big draws in college towns.
Yeah.
But they would go other places and no one would even go at all because college students would go from college to college. So they'd be like, this band's big where we're from, almost like their football team or whatever. It was like their team, the band would be, you know? So the band could roll in like a blues traveler and just fucking sell out like Sun Stadium. You're like, who the hell is this band?
Well, in the 80s too, that whole left of the dial thing, but like with the Replacements, there was college radio for the first time ever got big, and it's just public radio is all it is. But, to even bring that up, look how Prince had his scene going, his kind of R&B 80s scene at the same time as there was this kind of a punk Minneapolis scene.
Yeah,
too.
in the same town.
Same
right
time,
up the street.
yeah.
It's almost like 5 minutes away at that bar because I went to First Avenue.
Right.
And then you go where all those bands are playing that bar and you're like, wow, this is like 3-4 minutes away.
Right.
That's so wild. And also a pocket in America where it's like, how could that much good music be happening? It's wild.
Yeah, man. And it's all happening. And you just like some of it. If you just listened to popular music at the time, you might have missed the entire thing. You could have lived there, but if you don't go to those clubs,
Yeah,
you're
if you're
out.
just a radio AM guy or FM guy going to work in the morning, you're not going to know about that at all. You have to definitely be a scenester and somebody that goes out at night, I think that's how a lot of people miss stuff or come on way late. By the 4th, 5th album, and then that's the old where the real fans are like, yeah, I don't like them anymore. That whole thing,
right? Because they
turned over.
they got to share it. They got to suddenly share it. All right. Well, here's another thing that's always been crazy to me. New York in the late 70s. It's literally a bankrupt city.
Yeah.
You can't survive here, and you get punk rock being born downtown. Disco, Midtown, and early hip hop, uptown.
Yeah, that's
the
nuts.
most creative time maybe in New York's history.
Yeah.
And everybody who wasn't at those scenes were like, oh, this city is dead. It's sad.
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
Not only that, but those people only stayed in their scenes.
Right.
So Lower East Side, CBGB people, they never went past 14th Street.
I've never met anyone from those days that told me that
they went to all of them.
Yeah, that they were in Studio 54 and CBGB's.
Nope, not at all.
And that scene, I mean, it really, until they all got signed and played, they weren't really even playing outside that one shitty little room.
That's it.
And that guy wasn't really even... It wasn't like he was a connoisseur of music. He just said, here's a stage, but you gotta play original music.
Same thing with Ness in San Francisco with the Mabuhay Gardens. Here's this Thai restaurant, and then some guy goes, hey, can I put a concert in here on a Monday night? And next thing you know, he's got Devo and Dead Kennedys and Blondie and all that. So same thing's going on the West Coast in a Thai restaurant. So it's amazing the makeshift little rooms that become the punk rock icon rooms.
Well, it's just like in stand-up comedy. If you go and play a room, some guy's independent room, you're going to tell your friends about it. You go, oh, this guy, he takes care of you. You can eat. You're going to make enough money to move on. So that kind of word of mouth that is by the creative people.
Yeah.
It's,
what's interesting, too, is I don't get into punk rock till later because in the 70s, I'm 52, I saw Saturday Night Fever, and I fell in love with it. I wanted to be Travolta. I don't know what I was, 12 years old or something. I'd have to do the math. But I wanted to be at the lit up dance floor.
Yeah.
I loved having a crew. My whole life I thought I got the crew. When they walk up and he goes, shut up, fools. We're the faces. He's telling them to shut up as they walk into the disco. That part knocks me out so hard. I wanted an Impala. I wanted to go out all night and just, burn rubber and hang out, and I fell in love with that. And then also right after that, I fell into the love of Rapper's Delight and early hip hop because I went to an all black camp, a boys club camp in Oakland. So I fell in love with that, and now I love the punk rock. Years later,
right?
It's crazy.
Well, here's the interesting thing to me about that Travolta film. It's very rare to capture in real time what's happening. Right. Normally you go back like American Graffiti, you need 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, you do it later.
This was exactly why it was happening. And like the summer after that, as that movie's coming out, those discos are opening all over the country based on one album and one movie.
That's so wild, right? It's like the early comedy boom of the 80s, the first one.
Yeah.
I was in San Francisco during that, so it's huge. You got Bobcat, you got Carrie Snow, and you've got Bobby Slayton. They've got the Morning Zoo. This thing's hot. Comedy is exploding. It's on TV now, Evening at the Improv. It's all over. All of a sudden, everywhere in California, every bar that used to be like, they went from Urban Cowboy Bar with having which is another Travolta movie. So you go from disco, lit up floors, to Ride a Bull, to a microphone and a fucking light.
Yeah.
And it went just like that, man. It was disco, then Ride a Bull, and then comedy. And every bar had a comedy night. I couldn't believe it. Everywhere I went, comedy night, live comedy. Didn't matter who was in there.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, you would just put up the word comedy and people
were in
would
there.
Show up for it.
Oh, they loved it, you know? And most of the time, I didn't even realize now that I do comedy, but it would be one good headliner that would just pop around and do these, weekend shows, like a one-off. And then it would be a bunch of, local guys.
Local guys who had been doing it 3 months and were already getting paid.
Exactly. It's so wild to think about that, Oh.
I want to get you into another, weird scene thing. If you look at these English boys in the early 60s, what was the reason that they would connect to kind of older black guys that were on the other side of the world? Isn't that one of the strangest things that ever happened? And they all loved the blues. They all
of them. That's how Mick
blues.
And Keith bonded at a train station over the blues,
And they weren't really selling it. Some of those guys I've had the chance to interview on my show, And they would be like, well, if you lived where the ships were coming in, the sailors would be bringing these albums back.
Yeah.
Now, how was that a marketing plan?
Yeah.
How did all these 14, 15-year-old whiter than white kids hear this music and suddenly like, oh, yeah, the Chicago blues is the way to go?
I believe, and I truly believe this, that was the first, like I told you at the top of the interview, how I love dangerous music. I believe that was the first dangerous music in their minds of like, you know, it was so pure back then in Europe, you know, and it was just so AM radio or whatever, you know, the BBC, whatever they were playing. And it was really restricted back then. Remember, it was like 2 channels. You couldn't have this. So I believe that was the first thing that was almost like a culture thing to them. Like, oh my God, listen to these stories. And this is radical. That's actually radical to hear, like, go turn, don't burn. Down, you know, and you're just like, what? And it would take them somewhere, you know, and I believe that's kind of the attraction of it. It was just so greasy and felt, you know, like wild.
Right.
You know?
And the fact that these were all like working class kids.
Right.
Maybe that was in England like what it was like to be a minority there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they're suddenly, in their own way, like, this music sounds like a switchblade to us. It sounds like a metal fist, and we're gonna use it.
I believe that.
I hadn't heard anyone ever say that before, but I find it fascinating now that you did, man. Because I've always been baffled.
Yeah,
always been baffled. And I mean, I don't know if they dug anything else. I don't like they were like we were listening to skiffle music before. And you're like, what?
I know skiffle music. It's like Jimmy Page. You know, he's playing skiffle.
Yeah,
and when you see him, you know, it's just so like
it's so strange.
Oh, it really is strange. But you got to think there was nothing.
Yeah.
There's no internet. There's 2 channels. It's regulated. You've got no money. You don't have any money to buy anything.
There's still holes in the ground from where the Germans
absolutely
bombed. They haven't even got to imagine, like, you know, now thinking what those parents were thinking. Like, when I was your age, I'm fighting Nazis and they're bombing my home, and now you guys are dressing up like girls and you're just enjoying life. You know, the parents must have felt like, how was this fair?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I know. We worked so fucking hard, and now you're just smoking early on, trying weed.
Yeah,
and you're out, you know, you're out fucking. Yeah, you know, and you got long hair, which back then long hair, the beginning of long hair is funny. Like you're thinking of the Beatles mop tops. That's so dangerous. You know, like, oh my God, look at these rebels. You know, it's just so. We'll never be able to ever see that again of a simple time.
We'll never get that kind of shock, right?
No, not really. But I do think that we will keep hearing some newer stuff. You know, there's even in comedy, you know, people are. I think that Rollins, although it's not straight comedy, when he goes out and does spoken word for 3 hours, I think it's one of the coolest.
He's fascinating.
Coolest formats I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff. And I think things just keep evolving. But, you know, it gets down into that thing when people say there's no good music anymore. I just know we're not going to have anything to talk about, you know, because that person didn't keep trying to grow and seek new stuff out. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there is something weird about music where people go, well, you know, my high school or college years is my music, and that's it.
Yeah.
They don't do that with movies. You know, they don't go, hey, I grew up in the early 80s and we had the best. You know,
I love Scarface only. You know, to me, after Scarface, they never made a good movie again. You're like, you know, if you watch Scarface again, the first hour is good, the second hour sucks.
Yeah.
You know? You know, the thing about music, I believe, and I say this in my on stage, is to most people, music, all it is a time machine back to when they didn't have bills and maybe a divorce and all that. It's just a time machine back to when they had freedom. And that's what it is to them. So it comes on, they go, oh, I love this song. It reminds me of no student loans. You know?
Right.
That's really what it is. Where, to me, you know, I barely listened to the music when I was growing up, other than the bands that I worship, you know, of the 70s stuff. But I don't just go back and listen to 5 bands, you know. I listen to hundreds of bands.
You know, there must be something where when you're younger, you're so raw and you're so ready, and that somehow life beats you down a little bit, and you can't just be stopped by something. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you don't keep art in your life,
I believe that
you're in real trouble.
You're done.
Yeah.
You know, I say this all the time. I find inspiration in everything. I'll go to a museum, a painting, a rock and roll T-shirt, an amazing, like a Frank Lloyd Wright house,
right?
A new car design, a guy, you know, doing spoken word, whatever. If I like to try to go see the best of the best. Like I went and saw the Bruce Springsteen on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. And here I am, 52 years old, couple thousand shows under my belt easily of concerts. And to be able to say, oh, 6 months ago, I saw one of the top 3 shows of my life. That is amazing.
And he did it differently than he's done any other show, right?
I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
He basically comes out, and if you've read his book, he just takes chapters from the book and he recites them. And as he's reciting a chapter, he gets into the song that obviously the chapter was about. So let's just say he comes out, and it's one of the most incredible, sparse shows I've ever seen. So he comes on, he's like, you know, I grew up a fraud. I sang about hot rods and motors and engines. I've never turned a bolt in my life. I don't even know what a carburetor is. But somehow you guys let me into your heart. And as he's telling this story, it's chapter 1. I go, oh, this is chapter 1. Weird. And then he goes into my hometown. And you're like, oh, wow, look, I get goosebumps whenever I think about it because it's so insane. And then, you know, then the next song, you don't know what song it is. He's talking about growing up and everything and Freehold. And then he plays Growing Up. It's rad. And by mid-show, he starts describing how he meets Clarence. We're behind this bar. This guy comes up. He says, I can play, you know, and the big man. And you're like, wow. He's telling the story of meeting Clarence. And then he plays, you know, Born to Run, you know. And it's all acoustic or on the piano by himself. He's 5 feet away from you in a little box. You're in this theater that's so small. And you're just floored. And you go, yeah, man, this guy is a superstar. Straight up a master of art, man. He's telling me stories. He's singing songs. I'm crying at sometimes. I'm laughing, and I'm moved. I floated out of there. After I saw it.
You know, the thing about Spring... Do you watch the Jimmy Iovine thing?
Loved it.
Right?
Loved it.
When you see... at a young man, just like how driven
I love
he
that.
was, you
that
know?
Born to Run sessions.
Yeah, man. And you're just like, Jimmy Iovine's like, I'm falling apart. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even look at this fucking guy anymore. He's crushed me. And it's that weird thing that, like, a lot of times you'll find out, oh, an artist isn't a nice guy. Yeah. You know, like Miles Davis wasn't a nice guy. So you throw that shit out and you're like, no. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think that a lot of times people ask me, man, you got somewhere pretty quick in your comedy career, 8.5 years. And I'm like, it's all I want to do. And now at 44, now I'm 52, but at 44 when I started, I realized, oh, I really love this. And when you really love something like Bruce did, you're just not even seeing anything else. Years have gone by with me right now. Just years. I can't even tell you where I've been and most of the shows. I've done almost 3,000 shows. I don't even remember most of them because it's just nose to the grind, you know, and you're just in it and you're enjoying all of it. I couldn't even tell. I go through the photos. Thank God for Instagram and my camera, because I'm like, oh, I relive it. Like, wow, I forgot about this. Like being in Detroit and getting to go see. I remember the lady. I talked her into letting me go into Motown. They were closed. I was like, you don't understand. I'm never going to be here again.
Right.
Probably. Let me in. And she let me in and just gave me this great tour. That kind of stuff I just remember from the comedy, It's and that's how I look at Bruce or anybody. If you really love what you're doing, you go for it with the pedal down, and everything else just is to the wayside. Partying, video games, going out with your buddies, especially at this age, I'm well over that. They're married, they've got kids, divorces, jobs, or whatever. I'm into something totally different, and it's wild, But to be at that age, at Bruce, and have that much focus, and
Yeah, when he certainly doesn't need to do it other than the creativity, right? That's the only thing, is he's going, can I do this thing, you know? And I don't know if his management feels like, oh, this is, just think of how many stadium shows he's not doing while he plays that little room.
Yeah, but his manager is incredible.
Yeah.
Original manager, and that guy, those guys are real careful. And I look at certain people's careers, and I study them and how not to make the wrong move. There's a lot of careers. That's what's great about entertainment or even business. You have so many people out there that you can study and go, oh, here's where the bad move was.
Right.
And either you study it and you get on the path and you either make the bad move too, or you go, I'm not taking that wrong turn. I look at guys like Tom Waits. I look at Bruce. I look at even comedians, Bill Burr, even Ari Shaffir. I look at Ari Shaffir big time about, I'm doing what I want to do, and I don't give a fuck what the business says. You do need to play ball with the business, but you don't need to sell your soul. You know what I mean? I look at it like that, especially in this day and age where you can create your own stuff.
Well, Waits never seemed like he played the game, right? Tom
Never.
Waits is just, and it was still, I caught him in the 70s when, it was like he was doing stuff like Closing Time and Small Change. I thought it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen in my life to this day.
Yep.
And it was, he changed that whole scene. Like he just went in a different direction. And I'm telling you, I'm watching it and I'm like, this is as good as Sinatra or whoever. And then he was just dropped all that kind of playing. And it's just amazing to me.
And that's when I come in. I come in on the Bone Machine record, and I go see the Bone Machine tour in Oakland at the Paramount. And there's 5 shows in my hand right now. Look, I've seen thousands of shows, and I'll tell you, lots of them were next level. But as far as where you put together art and music, it's Nick Cave, it's Tom Waits, it's Springsteen, it's Rollins. It's a handful of people where it was multiple sensories were touched. You know what I mean? Of like, wow, I don't even know what I just saw. Like Lucinda Williams on the Car Wheels and a Gravel Road tour. It's just like, whoa. They're next level things, and by the time I see Tom Waits on Bone Machine, I'd never seen anything like that before. I don't even know what the fuck I was seeing, man.
Right.
The music was so organic and real. I was like, how are they making these sounds? When the earth starts screaming and the light is dreaming. And the band's just playing like circus music behind them, but it's the heaviest shit you've ever seen. You're going like, wow, man. It's those are the people, man. Those are the people that I like to look at.
And what the fuck was in his head to
I don't
do
know.
that?
I don't know. His wife wrote a lot of the lyrics, Catherine, which is even more wilder, But then you get Mule Variations, the next record.
Yeah.
Those two back to back to me. He completely drops that stuff you're talking about.
Right.
He's like, no longer am I the piano crooner.
Right.
And just becomes a full-on his own thing. Nobody does that.
I know, and he really did come out of that singer-songwriter,
Totally.
70s thing. I mean, when you think, Ricky Lee Jones was his girlfriend, and she was probably the last one into that singer-songwriter. Like, she was the last one through the door before it all changed.
Right.
And the next thing you know, like, she's still into that scene, and he's off being as weird as possible.
I love it, and the balls to do that too.
Yeah.
The balls of doing that, of just changing completely. That's what I love about like certain bands. They're completely all different.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you look at U2, and you get early on, by the time they get to Octung Baby, you're like, how did this band make Octung Baby, the same one that made like War?
Right.
That's people that are pushing themselves more and more. We got to push ourselves more and more, Eventually you run out of push because you've explored all the stuff you want to explore.
And then it gets false that, okay, I'll do it, go in this direction.
Yeah.
Because that was funny about, and I think everybody who grew up loving Bowie thought to themselves, we can't keep staying here. We got to, Bowie would change, And I always liked the fact, like with Bowie, I felt like after the glam years, I was always one album behind.
Right.
I was like, no, I don't like this. And then I would go back to it and go, no, it's fucking great.
Yeah.
I lived in Delaware County. And, when Bowie was coming in to play with, Philly International and all that, I was like, oh, fuck, he's bringing glam to Philly. This would be great.
Oh, yeah.
And then he makes a soul record. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And now I go back and listen, and I'm like, this is fucking genius
Yeah.
that he would do this.
It's like the Dylan, the Catholic records or whatever, the infidels and that stuff. Just slayed, and people hated it. Oh, I put it on as some of the best now, man. Like One More Cup of Coffee and Mick Taylor playing on these records, and
fuck Mick Taylor. Huh?
Oh, Mick Taylor, man. Stones never recovered in my eyes. Never recovered.
And when people go, because that era. The Mick Taylor era
it's
of the
unbelievable.
Stones is my favorite Stones. It's probably my favorite band for those albums. And yet most people in the street don't know where that sound comes out of.
It's unbelievable. When you hear Can't You Hear Me Knocking?
Unbelievable.
And they play the back half of that, it's some of the most haunting music of rock and roll ever. Just how it gets into that jam. I feel like I'm shooting dope. Yeah. And I'm in some loft in New York, and I can't get up. And it's just like, that whole thing in there, man. Yeah.
And that literally, like, you would be a little kid, and you go, is heroin great? You know what I mean? Like, I would be listening to him or Lou Reed, the Stones and Lou Reed. I'm going, it must be great. Yeah, it must be unbelievable.
Yeah, I do heroin, and I write great songs, right? Even when you get into that Seattle thing.
Yeah, sure.
All those guys, and they're all gone now except for Eddie Vedder. Chris is gone. And then you got Kurt Cobain gone, and Lane Staley gone. That's how real that fucking scene was.
Yeah.
There was no, all the fake bands that came out of that later, like Nickelback and all that sound of like, even STP and all that. When you look at that was so real, and that's just that's the next scene.
Do you think that the rain got to them? Like just this fucking and so much rain, like I can't take it,
and no fucking money.
Yeah,
Seattle back then. I don't know if you went up there around that time, but I played music and I'd go up there. It was just kind of felt like a gloomy, poor city. It felt like some old. You got the port there or whatever where, the fishermen and all that. It just felt like nothing. It was cold and damp, and dark.
Yeah.
And I could see, because I was in San Francisco at the time and a lot of foggy days there, but still nothing. At least San Francisco, you're like, look at this scenery.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the food here and everything. Up there, it's just fucking dark, man.
Yeah.
And, but some of the greatest music, even when you look at pre-Pearl Jam, I think one of the greatest bands out of there is Mother Love Bone.
Sure.
And I love Andrew Wood and what he was doing. And he was taking some of that gloom and some of the glam of Bowie and making his own thing, and it was groovy and funky.
Yeah, man. The way that came together, where they kind of dug Bowie's Heroes, and they dug Neil, and then they dug punk rock. And the fact that they had it in their own thing, like maybe the second the rest of us found out about it, it started to suck, maybe. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was like a ship coming into Hawaii, you know, in the 1600s. Like, oh, fuck, it's over.
Oh, it's over. Know? They're going to all start coming here for vacation.
Yeah.
Seattle was interesting, man, because it was just such a massive scene and a massive, influence on not only sound, but how everybody dressed, man.
Sure.
The Doc Martens, the flannels, and that was just shit they wore, you know?
I lived in Florida when that broke, and kids were dressing like that. And I'm like, you're going to kill you. Yeah. You're going to die down here, man. And they would be just wrapping these flannels around their shorts. And you're like, they did not do this to be cool. They're really fucking in trouble up there.
Yeah,
they need to keep warm.
And it's just Goodwill clothes, you know? Like, back then, I remember you could get the actual brand Pendleton, which goes for a couple $100 now. You could go get a nice used Pendleton for like $12 at the Goodwill. And that was your jacket. You just wore it every day. You wore the same clothes every day, you know? So
you were hanging up there a little bit before that scene broke nationally?
Yeah, I was playing music all over. So I actually booked, not only was I playing music, but I booked a club, and I booked Alice in Chains early on with Pearl Jam when they were called Mookie Blaylock, and became friends with them. And it was funny because last year I toured with Alice in Chains, opening for him as a comedian, and it was so full circle. I talked to the guys on the podcast about that early concert of booking them, you know, and having them on. There's only like maybe 40 people at the show, but we all loved him, you know. And it was more about me and my friends wanted to see him, you know. And also we loved Mother Love Bone, so we were like, the Love Bone guys are coming, Mookie Blaylock, let's see what this is. And it was more for us, you know.
Were they playing all original music, or were they doing there was no covers in that whole scene, right?
No, none that I saw, you know. It was just the stuff that was on the first record. Pearl Jam's record wasn't out yet.
See, I mean, think about that. We brought up all the different other scenes that you could think of, and they all started as cover bands in some way.
Yeah.
And these guys were just like, no, we're singing our own dark shit, man.
Yeah, and also, what a lot of people don't realize is they come out of the box with their sound. Most bands find their sound a few records in, you know? But if you look at Pearl Jam or, you know, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and they just come out of the box with this dark-ass shit, you know?
That's interesting, man.
Yeah.
That is interesting. And that they all kind of sounded somewhat like each other. Like, they were definitely, instead of sounding like the bands that came before them, like Aerosmith sounded a little bit like, you know, Zeppelin or whatever. When you first heard those bands, you're like, I don't know where this sound's coming from.
It was definitely Sabbath derivative, but way slower and dirgier, and they were tuned down to B and you know, and D and open tunings and all that shit. They were like drop tuning was what made them sound so dark. So most bands tuned to 440 in E, so it sounds like rock and roll.
Well, you brought up Sabbath. Did Sabbath sound like anybody to you, like that first record?
I don't know where the fuck.
I know, man.
That to me.
That's the weirdest. I've always said that too.
That's the weirdest to me. Who was doing like evil devil rock?
I know.
You know, like down. Like what?
Yeah, that should have been in a weird movie soundtrack, right?
Oh,
it shouldn't
like Rosemary's Baby back then, you know? Who the fuck? How did the producer? How is he not going like, I'm getting the fuck out of here?
We're just going like this. Guys, this isn't working. I don't know who we're going to sell. You know, kids, this is not going to play at anybody's prom.
I know.
But here's the other thing. Does Ozzy sound like anybody that came before him?
No, man. Especially when you're getting into that, you know, like a Hole in the Sky and stuff. He's like way up there, and it's really evil and wild, and it's his voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I'm looking through a hole in the sky. It's like, and then when you see the early footage of them, man, you're
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? So,
Yeah.
That is some original shit there. That's some ground zero shit
Yeah,
there.
I've always said that. I go, you could always kind of tell where every other band
Yeah.
came from,
Yeah.
you know?
And I love it when they're like, well, we were just listening to the blues, you know? And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, what blues?
And Ozzy's always like, I love the Beatles.
I know, right?
How?
I know, like not one thing sounds like the Beatles. And the only ballad they had was that Changes, and I'm going through changes. And
Yeah.
that's like still evil sounding, you know?
Yeah.
It sounds like suicide, that thing. Like he just took some cyanide from Jim Jones, guy in a grape, you know? Oh, man. You grew up in Florida, right?
No, I grew up outside of Philadelphia and then moved down to Florida later. But
What were some of the early concerts you went to? Did you see anybody rad?
the first show that I saw and hadn't heard of him, it was a band called Frampton's Camel.
Oh, wow.
And that was Peter Frampton.
Frampton's Camel.
Frampton's Camel.
After Humble Pie?
Yeah, it was right after Humble Pie. Humble Pie, I think, was still touring without him. Right. Humble Pie was supposed to be the first show that I went to, and my parents said, no, you're not going into the car with these older boys, you know, and all that. So I saw Frampton, and on that same show was JoJo Gunn and Edgar Winter.
Wow.
So that was like, that was like pure 70s music. You know, it was like a pure Almost Famous.
Total guitar.
Thing. You know, so when I saw Almost Famous the first time, it was like fucking hit me in the chest because I'm like, this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, I know what it was like to be that little kid looking around and just being like, okay, I got a new tribe. Jay Giles used to play all the time, and maybe still the best live band I've ever seen in my life. Faces, bands like that, Deep Purple.
Skinner?
Skinner, very early Skinner, which
Ed
was...
King era?
Yeah, it was just really, really big. But there was a show that I saw in 75 that literally everybody was doing acid for, and it was Pink Floyd.
Oh, yeah.
So we went to see the show.
Is that the Animals tour?
No, it was pre-Animals. It was literally pre-Wish You Were Here, right?
Whoa.
So everyone's doing acid. They come out and play multiple songs from Wish You Were Here, which nobody had heard.
Right.
And we're just fucking holding on to the chairs and shit.
Yeah.
And then they walk off stage after doing... If they didn't do every song from it, they did, you know, 80%, but I would never know. So we were all like, what the fuck is, you know? And then they came back after that and did the entire Dark Side album.
Wow.
So we're just launching, and then they go off again and they do Echoes.
Wow.
And it
Echoes, dude.
It was like the perfect LSD show.
Wow. Like it was like a 3-part play.
Right. So like each time, like we would go, and then they would come back and we were like, oh shit, you know?
Yeah.
And then, but I don't even remember anybody like applauding or anything. We were just like, yeah. You know, this is where we live now. We live inside of this.
Yeah.
And that was like, I'll never have another experience like that, you know?
There's nothing like seeing where the psychedelics line up right at a concert.
Right.
Man, I remember seeing you too on mushrooms for the Octung Baby tour.
Yeah.
I still think about it to this day. Just the way it lined up. The cars are flying over the Mini Coopers.
Yeah.
He's out there with the fly outfit and the leather suit. He's dialing up shit. Are you there? You know, and you know, presidents are coming on the screen, and it's just moving me, man. That's like,
and that was just like a couple years after he was Jesus. He was Irish Jesus, and everybody thought, okay, we're gonna follow this guy like it's a
Joshua Tree.
Yeah, Joshua Tree. That was such a major tour and was so touching to everybody, and they just went, oh fuck it, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to be your religion.
I love how he just reinvented himself. Like he was anti-rock star,
Yeah.
and that's how he sold himself, kind of a Kurt Cobain anti-rock. And then he goes, "Fuck this! I'm going to be the rock star.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the biggest one, every one I've ever thought. I'm going to throw Elvis in with a little bit of David Lee Roth, some Bowie, like giant rock glasses and everything. And then it was great. It was genius.
And literally, it pissed a lot of people off when that happened because they were really like, "Hey, what are we going to do? Are we going to save the whales?"
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like everyone's like, "I think we found our thing that's going to change the world," and he goes, "No, we're rock and roll entertainers."
Yeah. What do you think? A lot of people ask me this, and it's really hard to answer. But what do you think was the greatest concert you ever seen?
I'm going to go back to that thing that you brought up, that it has to do with the night and the crowd as much as anything.
Right.
And that you have to really be into that whole thing. And I honestly believe that the greatest frontman I've ever seen in my life was Peter Wolf with the Jay Giles Band.
Wow.
And to see them in Philly where people dance,
Yeah.
and the entire fucking place was dancing. And there was a moment in the show where the whole band went up in the air. They just jumped on a point, and the entire audience jumped with them. 17,000 kids went up in the air.
Wow.
And we all came down at the same time. And the funny thing is, I brought that up to Peter Wolf one time when I had the chance to get him on my show, and I see him just kind of go, "What?" You know what I mean? Like, It was like, I remember that moment. You know what I mean? But it was, I guess, like trying to, like losing your virginity to a prostitute and trying to explain it to her later.
Yeah, it's just like, dude, you're one of the 1,000 dicks that day. Yeah. That's like one of the 1,000 shows to him in a year.
But there's so many, like, the amazing church thing about music.
I love it.
Where that moment that we could say we kind of understand it, but we don't know how that happens. And I think it happens sometimes for an entire show and sometimes for a part of a show where there's no difference between the audience and the band. And you can look around at people that just go, wow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like wherever this place is, we're here right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's why people go to church. I think that's, that musical moment where we're going for the Spirit, we're going through the Spirit, is why people go to church.
Some of those big evangelists, I can see that, where they really they're almost like rock stars.
Yeah.
And they're grabbing people in, and people are, they're disconnected from their problems, their job, their bills, or whatever it is. And for one good 2 hours, somehow magically, and a lot of it has to do with pre-cell phone, you're completely engulfed in
You're right, man. You can't hold those fucking phones up and get there.
I mean, I recently saw, I went to one of the last Dead shows, the one that was Grateful Dead, not Dead and Co. now, the Fare Thee Well. And, I think one of the last great music scenes is the Deadheads, because they're so into music, still, and being with each other and everything. And I was there, and I was really like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, me too.
For years, I was like, fuck these hippie dirts. Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was like, get out of here, Trustafarians and anti, big time. And now I love it so much. And I think it has to do also with the time that we're in right now, of why comedy's big. Comedy was big during bad political times in the 80s, and here's comedy big again, and also some great music coming out. So that's what bad politics brings, great art.
Yeah, there's definitely somebody, poverty helps. Somebody told me, and I'll never forget this thing, because we talked about that New York scene and, the San Francisco scene and the Detroit scene, and these were all problem times in America. But someone said to me, great art is young people in old buildings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I'll never stop thinking about that, because just when everybody thinks it's shit, some young people, they're at the beginning of their time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. How do you get into comedy? Because I'm a West Coast guy, and I didn't know who Ron Bennington is because I didn't know Bennington and Fez.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up on it. I didn't even grow up on any Anthony and Opie. I didn't know any of this stuff. I know Howard Stern because once he
was national.
He got national.
Yeah.
But I'm a West Coast guy, and all my DJs are out there and everything. But how does that all start for you? Who are your comics? Because I see you every night. We work together all the time at the Cellar and stuff.
Well, I've only been doing stand-up again for a year and a half. I quit for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I was down in Florida. I wouldn't have ever gone and done comedy if the comedy explosion didn't come to me. I never would have, I'm going to go to New York or LA. I didn't think that kind of stuff was possible.
Right.
And then I jumped into it, and it was easy enough to get involved opening up my own nights and my own rooms. And once I did that, open a club with a couple people, went to promote it on a radio station. I would bring my comics down, and they go, people forget this, but before podcasting, stand-ups were pretty bad on the radio. Yeah. They were really like, I'm not doing my material, and I'm not answering this weird guy. Yeah. So they said, look, why don't you come down by yourself? And I came on Friday, and it was like, a big day for them. They go, come back. You can promote. You promote Thursday and Friday, and then come on Wednesday. And then they just go, look, a book came out, and we're doing really great. Why don't you be the new morning show with this broadcaster? And we just turned around and had the #1 show in Tampa.
That's nuts.
It was insanely backing into something. And it just like, I've never been an ambitious guy. I'm a pretty lazy guy. And, that's how I ended up buying homes and raising kids and all that kind of stuff. And when that show broke up, we came up here to New York, and I was on the same station as O&A. And then when they got fired, I went to D.C. for a little while. And then Sirius said, look, we're bringing you guys and O&A here. And that was it. It was XM then. Right. And, I kind of backed into anything. And then because of that, when I got into this kind of stuff, they go, is there anything else you want to do? And I go, I'll do some interview shows. And I started Unmasked. And I think we have, I don't know, like 175 hours of me talking with, stand-ups about their careers and stuff amazing. Like that. And I do, interview shows with rock people. I do shows talking about scenes and playing songs from scenes. Now I work with my daughter, which is a really weird turn to take. And it's all just been fun. But if it wasn't easy, I wouldn't have done any of it. I'm not a hard worker at all.
Yeah. What do you think you would have done if it wasn't this?
I was literally banking on an early death. You know what I mean? Like that was
the
my
same way. Like I thought I'll be riding this out hard.
Yeah.
And then you get to a certain age and you're kind of like, oh.
Well, I just became a grandfather, and it's been weirdly the sweetest, best thing that's ever happened to me. And again, something unplanned. There's no responsibility to it whatsoever, And it's just like another one of those surprises in life that I didn't see coming.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing the show, man. And thanks for having me on Bennington on Sirius XM, everybody. It's on, what is it, every day?
Every day on, what channel are we on, Chris?
Faction Talk 103 at 2 p.m. East, Monday through Friday.
And I want to say about this, man, the first time I saw you, I dug you right away. I dug exactly where you were coming from. You're so much fun. And I think you got that lust for life, and it comes across in everything, man. So thank you so much, and what a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on.
This was a blast.
It was great to be on your show, and I love working with you. Like whenever I see it, it's like, all right, Ron's here, and it's the East Coast has some really great people out here doing comedy, and it's just great to see them every night. It really jacks me up. Like I'm like, oh my God, there's Ron, and there's Jimmy Norton, and there's a Tell, and I'm just like,
you can't just go in and go through the paces,
Well, that's why I love it. I like to get myself pushed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It's kind of a positive, competitive.
I love it.
You know what I mean?
I love it.
And again, it's kind of like jazz. You know what I mean? You got to up your game.
Got to up your game, man. You got to up your game because Miles Davis is in the room.
Here comes Coltrane.
All right, there you guys go. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Left to Be Talked. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and iTunes, and check out that brand new Conan set I just put up on YouTube, and give that a little love there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. This episode is brought to you by Wyco Vintage, my fantastic rock and roll t-shirt sponsor. Go to wycovintage.com. Look for that vintage concert shirt you've always wanted. Use the code DELRAZOR and get yourself a great discount. Del Razor, wycovintage.com, place of all the greatest vintage t-shirts. See you guys.